Speech is the medium and the vehicle to which we bring life to all these other rights. And then they go, okay, we see you're trying to stand up for yourself. And we've been conditioned within our municipal trainings to always stay in control because we're armed and we're doing something special. And we think you don't know that the power we have is derived from you. And because of that, we must put you in your place. Any state of mind that you're acclimated with when it comes to typical way of interacting with other humans, know that for the most part, 7 out of 10 of that is ignorance and trash. Now look at things reasonably and truly be fair and truly do things in good faith. Most people don't, and pen and paper would not allow you to get away with it, especially if you are incompetent. The rest of the card that says, yes, you can actually throw derogatory terms at anyone acting in an official capacity so long as it's not a fight in words. You can't just shift burdens and say someone did this wrong, someone retaliated, and I'm the one who was hurt. Boo-hoo, look at me. No. You have to actually be right. But how can you be right if you don't know what your rights are? Let's face it. You and I have been living and still live in a world that has normalized ignorance. That's well known by those who assert to be ignorant and by those who don't assert to be ignorant. But nonetheless, that's a well-known truth in the Western culture. You and I live among a standard in society where each sentient parties that have any distinct identity within said society have been given a leeway to just do something that we all know is just not right. But that's not even the problem. How we allow those ignorance and fuckery of society to occur is the part that is jaw-dropping. Take, for instance, age or appearance. The young have been given a leeway to be as ignorant as possible. Why? Because, well, they're young, dumb, and full of it. The expectation for the young to be the future of tomorrow and prepare them and treat them accordingly as to the future that we all require of that young generation is not being enforced. We look at them now and limit them based on what we see now. Therefore, the young never grow old. Sure, chronologically and physically, they get bigger, but up there, they're stunt. Let's move on to the old, because nothing is new under the sun. If that's the issue with the young, and that means anyone you see in today's world walking around that appears physically, chronologically old, there is something up there in their nervous system that's functioning that has been delayed. But the ignorance as it pertains to that is, we've assumed, well, because they're old, they're just by default entitled because the assumption is they know how the world works. That is a form of ignorance. Because if chronological age is what just causes you to know how the world works by default, then this world would not be as screwed up as it is, because these so-called grown folks are the ones that are screwing the world up, allowing the younger generations to be screwed up, because the horse behind only looks and feels at the pace of the horse in front of it. Now let's move on to the man-woman thing. The ignorance when it comes to men in Western society is, it's just been left alone and allowed the men be just this gullible creature that act on impulse, and the presumption that the more impulsive you are, the more you exercise a instant gratification of what you are as a male, the more it's synonymous with the exercise of power. When in truth, that's the opposite, because impulse submits you to an outside force. And as a male, as a man, outside forces are not to control you. It's supposed to be the opposite. So much that many men get lost in the sauce of impulse and confuse that with the ability of self-control, of self-discipline. And because of that, you gradually see women attempt to use impulsive nature of men to just get what they want. So much that Women lack basic communication skill in this Western world that we live in. They think just merely being there is sufficient and that they can just get away with anything, even if it is screwing other people's lives, even if it is taking other people's lives. All this varying degrees of ignorance that we have allowed in society, one way or the other, is affecting all of us in a detrimental way. These same children who gradually chronologically get old and physically gets bigger, the same man who functions solely on impulse, confused as a form of control, the same women who lack basic interpersonal and communication skills and self-reflection of self-responsibility and accountability, are the ones who go into professions that you and your children and your loved ones, who probably and likely do their best to be better than average, to take self-responsibility, to not be impulsive, to build interpersonal skills, and to work based on a goal and a focus, and not make an assumption. You are interfacing with all these other corresponding ignorance of society that's been simmered, well seasoned. Everywhere you go in today's world, in 21st century, there's another human involved that's providing some type of service of some sort, a public one, either through an elected position or not. Heck, go to Dunkin' Donuts. You have someone there as a cashier. Go to a cigar lounge. Someone there has to serve you one way or the other. Humans cannot help but be and deal with one another in everyday affair, even in the presence of technological luxury. We are always going to be there in the equation one way or the other. We just can't do without it. When it comes to the invisible strings attached to human activities, that road that you pass on, that building that you're going in, that a service is being provided, that you're purchasing something at, one way or the other, all the way to the house that you come back in, all the way to the vehicle that you use to travel, and the things that you put on. There are laws that act as invisible strings attached to each and every one of those things. And there are people involved in overseeing those laws that govern you and your activities, one way or the other. And these people, somewhere along the line, have been conditioned to say, it's all right to be a little ignorant. I'll get away with it. Oh man, I'll get away with it. I'm a woman. I'll get away with it. I'm young. I'll get away with it. I'm old. Right. But what happens is, as time go on, and those subtle, mild ignorance based on particular attributes in life that we all carry, there's a side effect to those. The side effect is that we ourselves suffer, and our children suffer for these things. But fret not, humans are not that stupid. Humans have organized systems called government to sort of nip any potential ignorance that might go rampant in the bud, to sort of exterminate it quickly before it gets too wild. Then you have the role of the judicial department that interprets law and put things in its place. Most of these things that we read in black and white, the reality is they actually ought not to exist. In a world that uses common sense, these things should not exist at all. But constantly we find that most humans have been comfortable in ignorance, that the obvious things as to how we are supposed to be are being written down as a reminder that, look, just use common sense, will you? Just get rid of impulsive nature of instant gratification. Just take self-responsibility of learning basic interpersonal skills and communication skills. Just realize that what you see is not the limitation of how the world works. Whatever privilege you think you have is subject to being revoked. And one of the ways that is done is through something called speech, because speech is what separates us from any other life forms. The intricate manner we can communicate our information from one point to the other to get our point across. Therefore, the same speech is considered a substantive right, because if anything goes left, Speech is one of the primary ways to which you would get out of said circumstance or get into a favorable circumstance. Therefore, the obvious is preserved in pen and paper, which is the invisible strings that affects human activity. First Amendment. First Amendment right to speech is very obvious, yet you'll be shocked to realize that the reason why the right for you to speak freely, a no-brainer thing, is preserved in pen and paper is because those who framed this Constitution knew that humans are full of it. And humans have the tendency to take advantage of one another based on a particular position or a particular identity. I'm sure you've been through it one way or the other where someone tried to just limit your ability to speak in certain circumstances, or you said something and someone basically used that to lash out on you one way or the other, whether the effect was short-term or long-term, whether you felt it immediately or it was delayed, whether it was directly or indirectly. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise or abridging the freedom of speech. Very simple, reserved, substantive right. Probably the most powerful, because you can say you have the right to be secured in your person's papers in effect, but you still have to express it through something called speech, because that is the primary way humans communicate. Speech is not just these words you're hearing or the words that you're using. Speech is the things that are written down. Speech are pictures. Speech are things that you put on yourself. Speech are symbols through your own body language and more. Without speech, most of what we consider rights, quote unquote, are dead. Speech is the medium and the vehicle to which we bring life to all these other rights. But at the end of the day, when you're suing someone, what do? You put it on pen and paper. You enter it into some type of court docket. That pen and paper is speech. That speech is the vehicle to which you bring to life all these things. And we know when it comes to pen and paper, if you don't declare it, if you don't succinctly particularize what your intent is, that right is as good as dead. In other words, speech, just as much as privacy, is the backbone of all these substantive rights preserved in the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments, which limits any governmental actors and preserves the integrity of the powers inherent in you to which that government was founded. And in minding your basic affairs in this world, you will get small children in big bodies, those who lack basic interpersonal communication skills, those who power have been stripped from them during childhood, and they're seeking a way to validate themselves by using positions in society to arbitrarily hinder others. The impulsive nature of saying, I am God over you, one way or the other, because they haven't learned any basic life skills otherwise. Therefore, it is up to you to know better so that you can do better. And in doing better, you must know what your rights are. Speech. If you know the Fourth Amendment requirements, elements, standards, and tests, you're gradually getting there. But that's about 10% of the way. Without knowing the intricacies of what speech constitutes, that journey of preserving your substantive right might be futile. You might run out of fuel. There's someone else somewhere out there, based on what they've gotten away with throughout their whole life, based on a certain identity or particular position that they're acclimated with playing, they will take advantage of you. So my question to you is, do you really know what this thing called freedom of speech is? And do you know the paths that it splits into? Retaliation is one of those. And this same preservation of speech preserves the ability for others to not retaliate on your words. United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, case number 2, quote unquote, cause, meaning that the adverse action, then aka will cause the injury, against plaintiff you would not have been taken absent the retaliatory motive. It may be dishonorable to act with an unconstitutional motive. In other words, good faith versus bad faith. An official's quote unquote action colored meaning it's a semblance, colored by some degree of bad motive, does not amount to a constitutional tort if that action would have been taken anyway. Meaning, absent of you exercising a secured right, even if they acted in bad faith against you, and they would have done that regardless of you exercising a secured right, such as you already violating some type of law well established within society, for a number of retaliation claims, establishing the causal connection between a defendant's animus, the bad faith intent, which is the cause, and a plaintiff's injury being the effect, is straightforward, meaning it is simple. Indeed, some of our cases, malicious prosecution requires that you are vindicated from the suit in the first place, and that itself becomes the proof of the truth of retaliation, because if you were vindicated as not being guilty, then that shouldn't have occurred in the first place. That is a home run for malicious prosecution, which is a type of retaliatory injury. When it comes to the 40-minute videos posted on the Patreon page. Take care. Best of luck.